Hello and welcome to Forward Boldly. I'm Christine Niles. I am back from my retreat. I spent 9 beautiful days on pilgrimage in France with my family, which was very special. We visited a number of holy sites. We even saw some incorruptibles. We visited saints' relics, and we were very blessed, But I'm also glad to be back home, and especially glad to be able to reconnect with all of you. Of course, the biggest news over the weekend was what happened in Jerusalem. Israeli police blocking entry to the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, Cardinal Pier Battista Pizzaballa, essentially prohibiting him from saying Palm Sunday Mass at what some consider possibly the most sacred spot of all Christendom, at least one of the most sacred spots of all Christendom, the spot where our Lord was buried. The last time entry was blocked to Catholic clergy was 1,000 years ago, and it actually led to the launch of a crusade. So it was a big deal. It was a very big deal. It caused international scandal. Multiple world leaders spoke out condemning it. And here's a surprise, even U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who is as pro-Israel and Zionist as they come, he denounced the act as, quote, an unfortunate overreach. And another surprise, Senator Ted Cruz, also another hardcore Zionist, he also denounced it and said that it never should have happened. Now, as of Monday morning, the situation appears to have been largely resolved. I want to get into all of that and what my own take on all this is in just a bit. Also, other big news that I haven't yet weighed in on is the Iran war, which doesn't seem to be winding down anytime soon. It's been 4 weeks already. Instead, it seems to be ramping up. And Pope Leo, our Holy Father, has some pretty strong things to say about it. I have some thoughts myself. I will be glad to share those with you. Also, as a little note, I'm thinking of adding a live Q&A session just for supporters. So, you've all been so great in helping us out here. Your donations really make it possible for us to continue our work here. We just can't do it without your help and your donations. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. All your gifts are fully tax deductible, and your giving is deeply appreciated. We include all of our donors in our daily prayers. Truly, I'm very grateful, and I want to give you something special back, a little perk, just for the monthly donors. And so I am thinking of adding perhaps a regular live Q&A session, a live stream just for supporters. So let me know what you think of that. If there's interest, I'm happy to do it. I just have to figure out how to do it because I've never done that before. But let me know what you think, because then it's a time for you to be able to interact with me live and, ask me whatever questions you might have in the chat box. So again, let me know in the comments if you're interested. You can email me as well with your thoughts. You can write us at Stella Maris Media at proton.me. That is Stella Maris Media at proton.me. And of course, a quick plug for our sponsor, realestateforlife.org, the most pro-life way to buy or sell a home. I've spoken about them a lot. I highly recommend them. I've used them twice, once to sell my home, once to buy a home, so I can personally vouch for them. They will pair you with a faith-based realtor who shares your values. They'll try to get you the best deal possible, and the best part of it is they give a cut of their commission to the pro-life charity of your choice, and none of it costs you an extra penny. So to learn more, go to realestateforlife.org, realestateforlife.org. Please let them know that Christine Niles sent you. Again, if you support them, you also help to support our work here. Okay, so back to what happened in Jerusalem on Sunday. Cardinal Pizzaballa, with 2 or 3 others, a very small entourage, were heading over to do Palm Sunday Mass at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Just going to be them, no one else. And the plan was to live stream the Mass to others around the world so they could watch. That's because the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, along with the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Western Wall, have been closed to the public since February 26th. And the Israeli military wartime rules were that crowds of 50 or less could be present in these places. They were closed to the public. However, they were not closed to clergy and essential personnel. So basically, clergy and essential personnel have been able to access these holy sites all throughout the time from February 26th, basically up until Sunday. If an individual rabbi wanted to go pray at the Western Wall, he was granted permission to go pray. I'm going to get into that in just a little bit, especially when we hear the explanation from the Israeli police for why they blocked Cardinal Pizzaballa entry. So anyway, they blocked him entry. He, along with the custody of the Holy Land, issued a joint statement explaining on Palm Sunday morning what happened. And then, of course, there was a firestorm, international firestorm. Multiple government leaders spoke out against this, multiple individuals. And the Israeli police put out a statement claiming that for reasons of safety, he was blocked entry. They mentioned that there had been shrapnel that had fallen nearby recently. But the world leaders weren't really buying it. And after sustained pressure throughout the entire day, massive backlash all over the globe, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu finally announced on X at midnight, Israel time, that he had ordered free access to the Holy Sepulchre for Cardinal Pizzaballa. Some people saw it as damage control because he waited till the absolute last minute on Sunday to issue this announcement. Now, the government says it was for reasons of safety. They cite the fact that the Holy Sepulchre, the Western Wall, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, like I said, have been closed to the public since February 26. But here is why that explanation doesn't wash. Like I mentioned, the wartime rules allowed groups of up to 50 people. Other synagogues, parishes, and small mosques were allowed to remain open in Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, as long as they followed those guidelines. They were allowed to enter, they were allowed to worship, as long as they kept the crowd to under 50. Cardinal Pizzaballa's entourage, 4 people, max. Like I said, the police were allowing individual rabbis to pray at the Western Wall upon individual request. Now, when the Israeli police were asked, they came back and said, well, it's because the Western Wall is close to a bomb shelter, and the rules actually prohibit entry of anyone into a holy site that does not have a bomb shelter nearby. That explanation also does not wash. You know why? Because the Franciscan friars who minister at the Holy Sepulchre have never had entry blocked at any time since February 26th. And do you know how I know that? They confirmed it directly themselves. And as far as I know, I don't know anyone else who's reporting on this. But it completely destroys this narrative about safety or about the bomb shelter claim. Because apparently the Church of the Holy Sepulchre doesn't have a bomb shelter within like 90 seconds of running to it. And this is the reason why apparently they blocked Cardinal Pizzaballa and his little entourage. But look at this statement titled, "Is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre Closed?" The Catholic Church in the Holy Land issues a statement in response to rumors on social media. Statement from the custody of the Holy Land regarding the closure of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. And please note the date. It was published on March 22nd. That was only 2 days after shrapnel fell near the Old City in Jerusalem. It fell on March 20th. This was published on March 22nd. Quote, "The community of Franciscan friars present at the Holy Sepulchre has never ceased, day or night, to carry out the scheduled celebrations, the rites, the daily processions, and the liturgical prayers according to the provisions of the status quo." So while the Holy Sepulchre has been closed to the public, the Franciscan friars have been allowed daily entry to offer Mass and prayers, direct confirmation from them. So again, for Israeli police to claim that Pizzaballa and his tiny entourage were not allowed into the church for so-called reasons of safety, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. None. It also makes no sense that the cardinal is being told to go back to his rectory, where apparently he's supposed to be safer. The rectory is yards away from the Holy Sepulchre. Here's a map of Jerusalem's old quarter. You can see where the cardinal lives in relation to the church. It's not very far away. So if the concern is safety or shrapnel falling near Old Jerusalem, well, he lives there. That's where his rectory is. That's where he lives. That's where he stays. So it just makes no sense whatsoever. Now, on a related note, the Franciscan friars' statement refers to what they call the status quo. What exactly is the status quo that they're referring to? A lot of people actually don't know this. The status quo is an agreement that's been in place at the Holy Sepulchre for literally centuries, and which essentially states that no community can unilaterally change the physical layout, add or remove property, alter worship schedules, or perform repairs on the church without the consent of all other parties involved. Now, who are these parties? Mainly the Catholic Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, and the Armenian Apostolic Church. Now, a little history lesson. Israel gained control of East Jerusalem in 1967, where, of course, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre sits. Now, there is debate over whether Israel legally or illegally acquired control. Some today still refer to East Jerusalem as occupied territory. I'm not getting into all that right now. But in 1993, Israel and the Holy See signed what's called the Fundamental Agreement, agreeing to maintain and respect the status quo in all the Christian holy places. That means Israel is not at all allowed to interfere with the status quo. They agreed to this. And they're not even allowed to interfere during wartime. So critics say that they're blocking entry to Cardinal Pizzaballa during the holiest time of the year at one of the most sacred sites in all of Christendom, the very burial spot of our Lord. It was a clear violation of the status quo agreement. And it seems that Israel itself agrees, considering Netanyahu has agreed to grant Cardinal Pizzaballa unfettered access moving forward. The president, Isaac Herzog, said it was an unfortunate mistake that never should have happened. But do you know what I think really happened? I don't think that there was some, government conspiracy or anything like that to go after Cardinal Pizzaballa. I don't think anything like that was the case. I think what happened was a policeman, maybe a couple of policemen who are overzealous, possibly poorly trained, perhaps even with personal animus, maybe against the cardinal, who has spoken out, against what happened in Gaza, or perhaps personal animus against Christianity in general, decided to arbitrarily block the cardinal from entry, decided to exercise selective enforcement of the rules, not realizing that it was going to cause an international firestorm, not intending to cause an international firestorm, but that's exactly what happened. And I hope whoever those policemen were have been either disciplined or the rules explained very clearly to them or maybe reassigned to another detail. But the fact is, if you step back and take a look at it and the history behind all of this, Israeli police in the Old Quarter in Jerusalem, they have been accused of imposing heavy-handed restrictions in the past. It's not the first time. There have been clashes between the police and Christians during holy days, especially. For instance, in 2025, police engaged in what people call very aggressive crowd control. Some of them were even caught on camera beating Christians. And quite frankly, it seems to have gotten worse under the leadership of Itamar ben Gvir. Now, Itamar ben Gvir is a far-right leader who was appointed as a national security minister by Netanyahu. And do a little research on him. The man is a terrible human being. And I would say it has nothing to do with his ethnicity, his race, his citizenship, nothing. He is just objectively a terrible human being. He has been linked to terrorism earlier in his career. He was actually deemed unfit by the Israeli Defense Forces because of his radical extremism. That's quite something. They would not accept him because of his radical extremism. And he's chief sponsor of a death penalty law that just passed in the Knesset that would legalize putting Palestinian prisoners to death. He was so overjoyed that this passed that he brandished a bottle of champagne and raised a toast after the law passed. He was just giddy with excitement. This man has said that he would like to see every Palestinian man, woman, and child, okay, children included, wiped out, ethnically cleansed. He has made absolutely no bones about any of this. He's not even ashamed of it. And ever since he was appointed national security minister, it seems Israeli police have had a freer hand when it comes to using force. Other people have had a freer hand. the settlers in the West Bank. If you've been keeping track of the news, and EWTN has been reporting on this, which I'm very grateful for. Not just EWTN, but lots of other sites as well have been reporting on the increased settler attacks happening in the West Bank, including towards Christians in Palestine, literally stealing their land, setting fire to their homes, to their cars. In some cases, setting fires to homes with people still in them, destroying their olive trees, destroying their crops, beating their animals. There's literally video, and I can't watch it, but there's literally video of them going into a barn and literally beating the sheep to death. Why? Because they're trying to drive these people out. And they have driven many of these people out. They've literally taken their homes, taken their land in illegal settlements. And Gvir turns a blind eye. He allows it to happen. He wants it to happen because he believes that Israel should expand its territory by any means necessary, including illegal means. Just please do a little research on him. He's a terrible human being. Just a few weeks ago, I reported on settlers storming a Christian home in the West Bank and sending the elderly Christian mother to the hospital after they threw rocks at her and fractured her bones. And you know what? The Israeli police showed up, and you know what they did? Instead of arresting the attackers, they arrested her son, who tried to help his mother. In many of these cases of settler attacks, brutal settler attacks, the police don't help the victims. They turn a blind eye to the attacks. In some cases, they even help the attackers. CNN just reported that they were on the scene. American journalists, journalists from the U.S., going over there to report on what's happening in the West Bank. Their own camera guy was put in a chokehold by Israeli police for doing nothing more than documenting what was happening. That's all they did. They weren't breaking any rules. They were simply journalists there to document what was happening. I mean, it's unbelievable what is happening over there. And we should be praying and speaking out that all of this stops. But all of this is happening and ramping up under Gvir. And most Israelis don't like Gvir because of his extremism, his far right extremism. And yet Netanyahu keeps him in his cabinet, keeps him in power, because he needs the support of the far right. And so he's put together his coalition that includes various members. Gvir's on the far right, and he needs that constituency to keep him in power. But Gvir was one of the main voices, one of the loudest voices opposing President Trump and his attempts to end the war in Gaza. He didn't want that war to end. He wanted it to continue, and he wanted Israel to go all the way and completely destroy the entire place and ethnically cleanse that place of practically every single Palestinian. He was unhappy with the ceasefire and the peace deal that Trump was able to negotiate. And he exercises leadership over the Israeli police force, which is why it's not at all surprising that these things are happening. It's not really that surprising. And we should keep in mind as well, if you study the history of East Jerusalem and the holy sites, those holy sites do not belong to the government of Israel. Although it's occupying that territory, it does not own the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. It does not own it. It is not its personal property and possession. In any case, the official spokesman of the Latin Patriarchate in Jerusalem, Attorney Farid Jubran, stated on Monday, quote, "Attempting to play games with the church, especially on one of the holiest days of the year, triggered an unprecedented diplomatic backlash within hours. The United States, Italy, France, Spain, Belgium, Hungary, Poland, and many more. Even the global media shifted its focus away from Iran and concentrated on this issue for hours. Apparently, this is the only language that gets results. Apparently so. But stepping back from this one incident, there is widespread anger at the Israeli government in general. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It has nothing to do with Jew hatred. So please don't bring that up. Those are red herrings. It has nothing to do with that. A lot of Americans are seeing President Trump as entering this Iran war on Israel's behalf. And that's not coming from nowhere. Some of you might disagree with that. That's fine. But the fact is, this is what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
And then Speaker of the House Mike Johnson confirmed it.
And they determined, because of the exquisite intelligence that we had, that if Israel fired upon Iran and took action against Iran to take out the missiles, then they would have immediately retaliated against U.S. personnel and assets. We have troops in harm's way, and we have many Americans in the region, and that was of great concern. If we had waited for all of those eventualities to take place, the consequences of inaction on our part could have been devastating.
Now, after a lot of backlash, they backtracked. But we all heard what they said. We all heard exactly what they said. And we also know that the Pope has very strong thoughts about this war. In fact, he devoted his Palm Sunday homily to the topic, repeatedly referring to our Lord as the King of Peace. He repeated that phrase over and over and over again. The King of Peace. He said this, "Brothers and sisters, this is our God, Jesus, King of Peace, who rejects war, whom no one can use to justify war. He does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war, but rejects them, saying, 'Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are full of blood.'" Isaiah 1:15. Clearly, he's not talking about every single war because he understands that there is such a thing as just war. He's referring to unjust wars. But when he made that statement, he might have had in mind Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who recently offered these prayers.
"Pour out your wrath upon those who plot vain things and blow them away like chaff before the wind. Grant this task force clear and righteous targets for violence. Surround them as a shield. Protect the innocent and blameless in their midst. Make their arrows like those of a skilled warrior who returned not empty-handed. Let every round find its mark."
And now, of course, the White House is considering deploying ground troops in Iran, something that many of us were not expecting at the beginning of this. It would not only place more U.S. service members at risk, and we know that more than a dozen at least have died so far, and something like 200 have been seriously wounded, many of them dealing with brain trauma. But deploying ground troops, that's going to cause this war to drag on for potentially months, if not years, when we were initially promised that this would last only 1 to 2 weeks. And as a reminder, this was precisely what Trump promised during his campaign that he would not do.
"I'm not going to start a war. I'm going to stop wars."
No more wars, no more disruptions. We will have prosperity and we will have peace. Under Trump, we will have no more wars, no more disruptions, and we will have prosperity and peace for all. I am the candidate of peace. I am peace.
I voted for Trump 3 times. I admired his toughness and courage, especially in the face of near assassination. I was ecstatic when he won the latest election. I was so grateful. I was thanking God. What I did not expect was for him to reverse course on his major campaign promises, including the promise of no new wars. I was not expecting to launch preemptive strikes against Iran. And God forbid deploying ground troops to Iran. And these are preemptive strikes that the Vatican clearly does not believe satisfy just war criteria. Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Patriarch, who speaks on behalf of the Pope, he just made those comments the other day, does not satisfy just war criteria. Now, I know viewers have strong opinions on both sides. Some in favor of going to war, others not. A lot of you have left comments on my social media explaining your position, whichever one it is. But let me tell you my position. And I actually posted this tweet a couple weeks ago. It was retweeted hundreds of times, including by some notable people like Scott Horton and Greg Galloway and Daniel McAdams and others. But here it is. In 2003, I was a cheerleader for the Iraq War. I defended Bush against all critics. I fully believed there were WMDs, weapons of mass destruction. I rolled my eyes when Pope John Paul II condemned the preemptive strikes. I downplayed the torture memo. I was a dyed-in-the-wool neocon and hardcore Republican. Dick Cheney said the Iraq War would be over in a matter of weeks. it was closer to 8 years. An estimated 500,000 civilians dead, some say more, including Christians. Years later, I would come to realize how very ignorant, foolish, and blindly cultish I was then. It would take returning to the church to realize that my Catholic faith forms the core of my morals and beliefs, which don't fit neatly into any right versus left, Republican versus Democrat paradigm. Many of my fellow Christians cheerleading the Iran war today remind me of myself in 2004. The same slogans, the same phrases, the same cultish attachment to the president, the same drive to defend him and the GOP at all costs, even at the cost of my own conscience. You have to place principle above the person. Loyalty is first to Christ and his magisterium. That has always been my position. I've always been consistent on that. Loyalty to Christ and his magisterium first, over any person, over any politician, over any tribe. No matter how attached you may be to that person or politician or tribe. And quite frankly, I am disappointed to see so many Catholics out there who appear more loyal to Trump than to the magisterium, who will defend him no matter what he says or does, and who seem to act as if he is somehow beyond criticism, that he's some perfect idol that can never do any wrong. It is very strange for me to see Catholics behaving this way. It's unhealthy. It is cultish. It's not Catholic. He's a human being like you and me. He makes mistakes like you and me. He's not a god. He's not an idol. And a healthy democratic republic allows respectful criticism of our leaders when they make mistakes. 18 U.S. intelligence agencies confirmed that Iran was not an imminent threat. But what happens, Netanyahu visits Trump after being privately coached by Senator Lindsey Graham, who admitted that he privately coached Netanyahu, and somehow he convinces him to join them in bombing Iran. Do you know the only imminent threat that existed at the time was Israel's threat to strike Iran, which would then result in Iran bombing our military bases in the Middle East. That was the imminent threat. And to cut off that possibility, we decided to launch attacks with Israel at the same time, rather than waiting for that possibility. In other words, Israel forced our hand. We acted to protect our interests? Yeah, of course. But only after Israel's threat to bomb Iran forced our hand. And even those who initially supported the preemptive strikes, they're now changing their minds. They thought it would be a one and done, like Trump's strike on Qasem Soleimani in 2020. In and out, over with. That's not what this has been. This has gone on for 4 weeks, and we're getting signs from Washington that this is going to drag on far longer than what we were originally told, especially if they consider putting troops on the ground. Take a look at this tweet by someone named Val Locke. My younger sister is in the Navy, and I can now 100% confirm that she is being deployed to Iran and will not be back for at least 10 months, she states. At least 10 months. And now Republicans are freaking out over the poll numbers. Just look at this national poll by UMass Amherst. It's just released. Trump's approval rating is only 33%. Disapproval rating at 62%. Literally, it is the lowest approval rating he has ever had in either of his terms. What's his approval rating for the war in Iran? 29%. Even the latest Fox News poll, whose viewership tends to be most favorable toward Trump, it's usually the over 60 boomer crowd, tend to love Trump, they tend to love war. Even they are beginning to sour on the war and on Trump. Their numbers show 41% approval rate, 59% disapproval rate. Again, the worst disapproval rating of either of his terms. And the numbers are especially bad among independents. Only 25% of independents approve of the job he's doing. Same numbers for the Quinnipiac poll. That is a 10-point drop in approval since December, an even higher drop since before then. You know, people need to understand, Republicans are not the ones that got Trump elected in 2024. It was independents. And many of them were the independents who heard him when he did the podcast circuit with people like Joe Rogan, Theo Von, Lex Friedman, and others. A lot of them heard what he had to say about America First, no new wars, all of these things, Epstein files, JFK files, transparency, all of that, going after the deep state. And so they thought, okay, well, I've never voted for Trump in the past. He's not really my cup of tea, but I'm going to take a chance on him now because I like what he's saying. And they cast their vote. And now they feel totally betrayed. Now, you might disagree. You might think, oh, Trump's doing a great job. He's fantastic. We love him. He's the best. That's not what independents are feeling. And in fact, that's not what an increasing number of Republicans are feeling either. The independents are leaving Trump in droves, absolute droves, over what they see as broken campaign promises. And the problem is MAGA, which comprises of a lot of over 60 people, boomers. I'm not saying that contemptuously. I'm just speaking objectively about the demographics. A lot of these people are they're scoffing. They're scoffing. They're saying, oh, nothing to worry about. And they keep declaring victory. I see it. I see it all over my social media. It's like they're all in their little social bubble, their little echo chamber, and they don't see what's wrong. They don't see what everyone else is seeing. It is a 5-alarm fire, people. It's a 5-alarm fire. And MAGA, quite frankly, it's fiddling while Rome burns. That's what it looks like. And it doesn't help that our president is threatening to strike all desalinization plants in Iran. He just tweeted that Monday. He was threatening to strike all desalinization plants in Iran. That's literally a war crime. Other countries might do that, who have wicked leaders in charge. We, the U.S., we don't do that because it's a war crime. Desalinization plants are civilian infrastructure. They serve civilians. The rules of war forbid targeting civilian infrastructure. Civilians rely on desalinization plants, especially in the Middle East, to get clean water. And no country has the right to bomb those plants and deprive civilians, that includes little children, of clean water, drinkable water. People die, as you know, without clean or drinkable water. If you're a faithful Catholic, if you're a faithful Protestant, if you are just a decent human being, no matter what your religion is, you should be gravely opposed to such talk. Even if you think he's bluffing or practicing the art of the deal, whatever, we're supposed to be the good guys. We don't target civilian infrastructure. We don't commit war crimes. At least we're not supposed to. We're not supposed to bomb things that lead to civilian suffering and death. And no, you don't get to just say, oh, war is hell. War is hell. That's not an argument, people. That's not a rational argument. There are rules in wartime that we have signed on and promised to follow. We have an obligation, not just a contractual obligation, but a moral obligation to follow the rules of war. You don't get to say, oh, war is hell, and then you do whatever you want. No. That's how wicked people act. That's how lawless people act. That's how the enemy acts, the bad guys. We're not supposed to be that. And no, we don't get to lower ourselves to the level of the bad guys because they do it. I can't believe how many people, how many grown adults are using that argument. Well, they did it. We get to do it too. You know the phrase, 2 wrongs don't make a right. It's a phrase that little children learn from a young age. 2 wrongs don't make a right. And yet you have grown adults, so-called Catholics, so-called pro-life Catholics, pretty much making the argument that 2 wrongs do make a right. They did it. Let's do it to them. It's disappointing and it's unacceptable. And if you love President Trump, if you truly love him, you will push back on this. You'll make clear that this is not acceptable. Look, the U.S. military already has innocent blood on its hands when it accidentally targeted the girls' school in Minab. And that was on the very first day of the war, an absolute tragedy, killing 175 civilians, most of them little girls between the age of 7 and 12. A terrible, dreadful, and awful thing. And the conclusion from a preliminary investigation carried out by U.S. military officials, it's that This accidental strike was likely the result of faulty or outdated intelligence. But whatever the reason, killing so many innocent lives on the very first day of this war does not exactly shore up confidence that ours is a righteous cause. The vast majority of world leaders, including the Holy Father himself, certainly don't think that. Certainly think it's a righteous cause, regardless of what our military might think. Now, when I was in France and visited these various holy sites, I lit many candles. I offered prayers for a number of intentions. But one of those intentions that I repeatedly offered at a number of different holy sites was that God would bring an end to this war, an immediate end to this war, before more needless death and destruction and the loss of civilian lives occur. And I do hope that more Catholics would listen to the words of the Holy Father, that they would take them seriously rather than just dismissing them as someone who doesn't know what he's talking about. I did the same thing to Pope St. John Paul II back in 2004, only for me to realize like 20 years later, I was wrong. He was right and I was wrong. Maybe, just maybe, our church has wisdom and discernment that she's trying to pass along to us for our good, for our benefit. And we, as obstinate, in some cases wayward children, just dismiss her wisdom because we think we know better. We think we know better. Anyway, I hope that all of us can agree that at least we can pray together for a swift end to this war, for negotiations and for peace to resume. We should all desire peace because, as Pope Leo said, Jesus is the King of peace. That is his name. He's the King of peace. There is so much more to say on this, but that's enough for today. Thanks for listening and watching. If you have any questions, comments, I'm sure many of you have strong feelings about this. You are welcome to write me at stellamarismedia@proton.me. That is stellamarismedia@proton.me. I want to wish all of you a blessed Holy Week, a blessed Triduum, as we enter more deeply into our Lord's Passion this final week of Lent. And if you've failed in your Lenten observances and sacrifices so far, it is not too late to try and start anew this week. If you haven't been to confession, I strongly encourage you to go. God's mercy and his kindness await you there. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. Don't put it off until it's too late. Go to the tribunal of God's mercy. It's not too late. Do it this week before Easter. That way you have a wonderful, beautiful resurrection to celebrate come Sunday morning. Remember to please visit stellamaris.media if you'd like to sign up to our email list or if you'd like to learn how you can support us. Thank you for watching and listening. And in the words of St. Joan of Arc, in God's name, forward, boldly.